It began like any other day in our small, cozy home. The sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room as I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my morning coffee while little Ruth played with her toys nearby. Ruth, my precious 4-year-old daughter, was the light of my life, her laughter echoing through the house like music. But that day, something felt off. Ruth seemed quieter than usual, her bright eyes clouded with an unspoken fear. I brushed it off as fatigue, perhaps a side effect of her active imagination running wild. Little did I know, it was the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt us both. It started innocently enough, with Ruth mentioning a shadowy figure lurking in her closet. I chuckled, ruffling her golden locks affectionately, assuring her that monsters weren't real, and it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as the days passed, her whispers grew more insistent, her tiny voice trembling with fear each time she spoke of the shadowy presence watching her from the darkness. I tried to dismiss it as childhood fantasy, but deep down, a seed of unease began to take root in my heart. And then, the inexplicable occurrences began. Objects would vanish from their usual places, only to reappear in the most unlikely of spots. Strange noises echoed through the house at night, sending shivers down my spine as I lay awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old building. I brushed off my own fears, determined to stay strong for Ruth's sake. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. One fateful evening, as dusk settled over the horizon and the shadows grew long, I heard Ruth's screams pierce the silence of the night. Racing to her room, my heart pounding in my chest, I found her standing at the edge of her bed, her eyes wide with terror, as she pointed towards the closet. "He's here, Mama. The Shadow Man. He wants to take me away," she cried, her small frame trembling in fear. I felt a chill run down my spine as I glanced towards the closet, half expecting to see a dark, sinister figure lurking within. But there was nothing there, just the empty darkness of the open doorway. I gathered Ruth in my arms, soothing her trembling form as I whispered words of comfort, promising to keep her safe from whatever unseen terrors haunted our home. But the worst was yet to come. One sunny afternoon, as Ruth played in the backyard, I watched her from the kitchen window, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips as she chased butterflies through the tall grass. But then, in an instant, my blood ran cold as I saw her veer towards the old well that stood at the edge of our property, its dark depths hidden beneath a crumbling stone cover. "Ruth, no! Come back!" I screamed, rushing outside as panic seized my heart. But it was too late. As if drawn by some unseen force, Ruth teetered on the edge of the well, her eyes glazed over with a vacant expression as she stared down into the abyss below. I lunged forward, my heart in my throat as I grabbed her arm just in time, pulling her back from the brink of certain death. Trembling with fear and disbelief, I held Ruth close, tears streaming down my cheeks as I realized the true horror of our situation. Whatever lurked in the shadows of our home was not imaginary. It was real, and it was hungry for the innocent soul of my precious daughter. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the yard, I knew that our peaceful life was over. The nightmare had only just begun. As the days passed, Ruth's behavior grew increasingly erratic, sending tremors of fear through my very soul. It was as if a dark shadow had descended upon her innocent spirit, twisting and warping her into something unrecognizable. My heart ached with each passing moment, torn between the love for my daughter and the terror of what she had become. The first incident occurred one night as I tucked Ruth into bed, her small form curled up beneath the covers, her eyes wide with an unnatural intensity. As I leaned in to kiss her forehead, she suddenly recoiled, her body stiffening with an otherworldly rigidity. "Mama," she whispered, her voice cold and distant, sending a shiver down my spine. "He's coming for me. The shadow man. He's whispering in my ear, telling me to do terrible things." I tried to brush it off as another product of her overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. And then, in the darkness of the night, I heard it. A soft, chilling whisper that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, filling the room with an oppressive sense of dread. I clutched Ruth to my chest, my heart pounding in my ears as I whispered words of comfort, praying for the first light of dawn to banish the darkness that had taken hold of our lives. But the darkness only deepened. The next incident occurred during a visit to the local park, a seemingly innocent outing that quickly descended into chaos. As Ruth played on the swings, her laughter echoing through the air, I watched in horror as her expression suddenly shifted, her eyes glazing over with a vacant emptiness. And then, with a strength that defied her small frame, she began to swing higher and higher, her movements growing more frantic with each passing moment. I called out to her, my voice hoarse with panic, but she paid me no heed, her laughter morphing into a chilling, otherworldly cackle that sent shivers down the spines of the other parents nearby. I rushed forward, desperate to reach her before it was too late, but it was as if she was possessed by some unseen force, her movements guided by a malevolent will beyond my comprehension. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, she stopped, her body going limp as she collapsed to the ground, her eyes staring blankly into the distance. I scooped her up in my arms, tears streaming down my cheeks as I whispered words of love and reassurance. But deep down, I knew that the darkness that had taken hold of her was growing stronger with each passing day. The final incident occurred within the confines of our own home, a place that had once been a sanctuary from the terrors that lurked beyond its walls. As I prepared dinner in the kitchen, the air thick with tension, I heard Ruth's laughter echoing through the hallway, a sound that sent chills racing down my spine. I hurried to her room, my heart pounding in my chest, only to find her sitting on the floor, surrounded by her toys, her eyes fixed on something unseen in the shadows. "Mama," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of my own heart. "He's here. The shadow man. He's calling to me." I felt a cold sweat break out across my brow as I watched in horror as Ruth's body began to convulse, her limbs twisting and contorting in ways that no child's body should ever move. And then, with a voice that sent shivers down my spine, she spoke. "He's hungry, Mama. Hungry for souls. And he's chosen me." I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling with disbelief, as I realized the true horror of what was happening. Ruth was no longer my daughter. She was a vessel for something dark and malevolent, something that hungered for the innocence of her soul. And as I stood there, paralyzed with fear, I knew that the battle for Ruth's very soul had only just begun. And in the darkness that surrounded us, I feared that there would be no escape from the horrors that awaited us both. As the darkness continued to tighten its grip on our home, I found myself descending into a maelstrom of fear and despair, unlike anything I had ever experienced before. The whispers grew louder, the shadows grew darker, and Ruth, my sweet, innocent Ruth, grew more distant with each passing day. But it wasn't until that fateful night, when the true horror of our situation was laid bare before my eyes, that I realized the depths of the darkness that had consumed us. It began with a feeling of unease that settled over me like a suffocating blanket as I lay in bed, the soft glow of the moonlight casting eerie shadows across the room. I could sense something watching me from the darkness, a malevolent presence that sent shivers racing down my spine. It was Ruth. She was like a soulless puppet controlled by something otherworldly. something beyond reality. She was not looking like herself. Her voice was hoarse and demonic. She was laughing like a maniac. And then, with a sickening realization, it dawned on me. Ruth was not Ruth. The real Ruth had been taken by the Shadow Man, stolen away in the dead of night, replaced by a demonic impostor that wore her innocent face like a mask. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared into those empty, soulless eyes, realizing with a sinking dread that I was staring into the abyss itself. But there was no time for fear. With a primal instinct born of motherly love, I leapt from the bed, my pulse racing as I fled down the hallway, the echoes of demonic laughter ringing in my ears. I had to find Ruth, my real Ruth, before it was too late. But the house seemed to twist and turn around me, its familiar corridors morphing into a labyrinth of shadows and deception. I stumbled and tripped, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I fought to keep the rising tide of panic at bay. And then, just as I thought I could go no further, I heard it. A soft whimper, barely audible above the pounding of my own heart, coming from the darkness at the end of the hallway. Ruth. With renewed determination, I pressed forward, my footsteps echoing in the empty silence of the night. But as I reached the end of the hallway, my worst fears were realized. Standing before me, her form wreathed in shadows, was Ruth. But it was not Ruth. It was the impostor, the demonic soul that had stolen my daughter's innocence and twisted it into something dark and twisted. I recoiled in horror as she lunged towards me, her eyes blazing with unholy fury, her twisted form contorting in ways that defied all reason. With a primal scream, I turned and fled, the pounding of my own footsteps echoing in my ears as I raced through the house, desperate to escape the clutches of the demon that pursued me. But she was relentless, her laughter echoing through the darkness as she pursued me with a determination that chilled me to the bone. I could feel her hot breath on the back of my neck, could hear the whispers of darkness that seemed to emanate from her very soul. With every fiber of my being, I fought against the overwhelming tide of fear that threatened to consume me, drawing strength from the love I felt for my daughter, the real Ruth who lay trapped somewhere within the darkness. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I saw it. A glimmer of moonlight shining through a crack in the wall, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled determination, I lunged forward, my fingers clawing at the crack in the wall as I desperately sought escape from the nightmare that surrounded me. And then, with a final burst of strength, I squeezed through the opening, tumbling out into the night air as I gasped for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. But the respite was short-lived. For as I lay there, gasping for air, I felt a presence looming over me, a darkness that seemed to blot out the very stars themselves. And then, with a sickening realization, I knew. The demon had followed me. With a primal scream of defiance, I turned to face my tormentor, my hands trembling as I reached for the only weapon I had left. And then, with a surge of adrenaline-fueled determination, I lunged forward, about to plunge the knife into its heart. But I couldn't. The creature looked exactly like my Ruthie. My little Ruth. Her sweet face washed with fear, those beautiful eyes staring at me. She cried, "Mommy, let me go!" "Please let me go, Mommy." But I knew it wasn't Ruth. It was playing mind games with me again. I couldn't let it go. It took my Ruth from me. I raised my hand and plunged the knife right into its heart. Again and again and again, until it stopped moving. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a relief unlike anything I had ever known. For in that moment, I knew that I had done what I had to do to protect my daughter, to free her from the clutches of the darkness that had threatened to consume us both. And as I looked at Ruth's lifeless form in my arms, tears streaming down my cheeks, I couldn't feel anything anymore. I was numb. Soon my eyes couldn't keep them open, and everything became a blur. Then just darkness. As I regained consciousness, I found myself in what seemed like a hospital room. As soon as I woke up, I could see a few police officers around me. One of them came towards me. He said, "Hello, Miss Jane. I am Roger. I would like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind." I nodded in affirmation. "Do you remember what happened last night?" "Yes," I replied. "Can you tell us why you killed your daughter?" He asked me. "I didn't kill my Ruthie. That wasn't Ruthie. That was a demon. That was the Shadow Man. He took Ruthie. He took my Ruthie." I screamed, trying to describe what happened. They all looked at me in disbelief, as if I was crazy. But I wasn't crazy.